Chicago's Shoreline will soon be getting the long-awaited attention advocates say is needed to address Lake Michigan's rising water levels. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is taking on its first comprehensive study of the city's lakefront in more than 25 years with $3 million in city and federal funding. Joining us to discuss rising water levels, the study, and more are Joel Brummeyer, President and CEO at Alliance for the Great Lakes, and State Representative Kam Buckner of the 26th Legislative District, which covers several near North Side and South Side neighborhoods in Chicago. Thanks to you both for joining us. Joel, let's start with you, please. How would you describe the current status of Lake Michigan water levels? Is there reason to be concerned?
Well, it's a bit off of a record high, but there's reason to be concerned because what we're seeing over the last 5 years is really extreme changes in water levels. Water levels go up and down naturally, and that's a good thing for the lakes. But we're seeing a big jump from a record low up to a record high a couple of years ago, and that's caused some real problems for communities along the Great Lakes, including, of course, Chicago.
Representative Buckner, what's the effect of these fluctuating water levels on Chicago shorelines?
Listen, these erratic water levels have really been trying for many of us. Many of my constituents who live both on the northern end of the lake shore in Chicago and on the southern end of the lake shore have had tremendous amounts of flooding in their buildings. They've had a bunch of, bunch of the subsequent things that flow from the lake shore erosion and the rising water levels. And so we've got to find a way to get this under control.
And that building flooding, describe how that damage impacts, your constituents and the residents in those buildings.
It's huge. We had some flooding a couple of years ago on some buildings in South Shore that literally rendered the buildings unusable for a number of weeks because it took over the room and the building where the mechanics were, right? And so a lot of the things that make a building go, from the furnace and the boiler, some of the HVAC systems were all flooded out. And these people had to find a way to live through that. And so this is a serious situation. It has real life consequences.
Joel, how is climate change influencing all of this?
Well, water levels in the Great Lakes, they're really a function of evaporation and rainfall. What we've seen over the last few years is intense record rainfall and storms hitting the Great Lakes region. That water soaks into the ground, and it just made Lake Michigan rise and rise and rise. And the effect was this record high water level. That is directly connected to the changing climate. And we're facing the impacts of global climate change right here in our backyard in Chicago. And it's really critical that we are aware of that and we make sure that no communities get left behind as we're dealing with the reality of a changing climate that's bearing down on the Great Lakes and on the communities that depend on them.
So, Representative Buckner, as we mentioned, of course, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is about to embark on this study, first comprehensive study of the city's lakefront in about 25 years. The city is matching the federal government's $1.5 million for a total of $3 million. What will engineers be looking for or looking at?
They'll be looking at the totality of the circumstances, trying to see how we got here, trying to see what damage has already been caused, how do we prevent damage in the future. Honestly, Brandon, we just have not done enough. We've tried to find ways to patch this up with Jersey barrier and riprap and whatever we can find to immediately address the situation. But this is a great step forward that the city is putting skin in the game, that the federal government is putting skin in the game. And I will, do my best in Springfield to make sure that we're doing the same on the state level. We've got to have all partners come to the table and look at this from a intentional angle to make sure that we're moving us along so we can get to a better spot.
And Representative, what has investment on the South Shores been like up to this point?
It's been non-existent. It's been non-existent. And so I know Joe talked about this a little bit, but I want to make sure we hammer home the point that as we look at resources and we put resources into this issue, that we cannot leave certain communities behind. We cannot leave the communities south of Roosevelt who have really borne the brunt of this for a very long time behind. There is a constituent of mine named Jera Slaughter who talks about her first instance with these rising lake levels in 1987 and how she had a flood in 1987 and she was told that this is the worst that it would ever get, and today it's worse than it was then, and there's been no remediation, no real resources given to her and her community. And so we've got to make sure that we're being equitable when we move forward with this.
Joel, what else is being done or should be done to prevent the effects of rising lake levels?
One thing is that the Great Lakes region has been really effective at bringing dollars to bear on restoring the Great Lakes. And so through programs like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and many others, we're bringing hundreds of millions of dollars into the Great Lakes region to restore the shoreline and do other things to clean up the Great Lakes every year. It's really critical that we channel some of those dollars and some of that effort to make sure that communities like these here in Chicago that we're discussing, have resilience to climate change, that have resilience to changing water levels, because the water levels are going to keep going up and down, and it's going to become less predictable. But we've got a good track record of investing in restoring Great Lakes shorelines. We've got to do that bigger and better to deal with the reality that communities like the south side of Chicago are facing. I think we can do that. So let's get this study moving and let's show the Great Lakes region how a city can actually deal with this and help its residents and the people who enjoy the lakefront, and more importantly, people who rely on living near the lakefront in a healthy and safe home, that we know how to do the job.
Representative Buckner, what would you like to see come out of this study?
I would like to see some real answers and a clear path forward. Listen, our proximity to the lake is part of what makes us a great brand. So we've got to find a way to embrace that. But it also can be very dangerous if we don't take care to do the right things to protect people and property and businesses and our way of life. And this is a chance to do that. We've got 28 miles of lakefront in the city of Chicago. We've got 63 miles of lakefront in the state of Illinois. And we've got to find a way to make sure that people are safe and that we're doing something, one about this lake shore erosion, two, about what happens with the levels of the lake, and make sure that we're protected in the most aggressive ways.
Okay, and briefly, once the study is completed, first, about how long is it expected to take, and then what happens when that study is done, Representative Buckner?
Yeah, so I haven't heard a timeline yet on how long it's expected to take, but what I am asking for, and what I know many members of the General Assembly Lakeshore Caucus are asking for, is to make sure that we in this year's state budget are helping the work that the city and the federal government is doing in this, to speed along the process. We want this to be a process that, once again, is intentional. We want it to be deliberate because we want to get the right answers out of here, because we need the right solutions.
Right. And then I think once it is completed, I think the Corps does have to go before Congress and ask for more money to make the fixes. That is where we'll have to leave it. Joel Brummeyer and Representative Kam Buckner, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, Brandon.